introductions. And actually, I have a bill introduction, and that is RS number 23 RS 1746. And that is concerning how the state of Kansas reacts and responds to disasters in the state of Kansas. So that's my bill introduction, seconded by Representative Helgerson. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Bill's introduced. All right. Committee, today actually we're going to be working on the budget bill and trying to finalize that. Hopefully we can do that in one day, but if not, we do have tomorrow scheduled as well. And so first I would have Dylan brief the committee on exactly what actions have been taken in regards to the budget committee recommendations. Dylan? Yes. Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make note that should a water sound go off on this phone, I'm not responsible for it. We don't know why it's doing it. The techs are trying to figure it out. This thing is on mute, baby. But
you had informed me yesterday you're going to have that
they haven't figured it out yet.
Okay.
So I just want you to know it's on mute. It's something the phone's doing. Right. I'm blaming it on T-Mobile right now. I'm just saying.
All right. So if Representative Landwehr's phone actually has a malfunction, she's not responsible for it. Representative Tarwater.
Mr. Chairman, did you not recognize the fact that my phone was having severe problems the other day?
I would surmise that your phone is not in the same malfunctioning mode that Representative Landwehr's is in.
User has a malfunction. But anyway, Kansas Medical Society provided the breakfast burritos today for me on my behalf. So thank you.
Thank you to the Kansas Medical Society. Representative Ballard.
Thank you. I was going to kind of help him out a little bit, but since you got a little help, I won't say anything because you were multiple. All right. I just want to introduce someone in the audience today. Last night was Boys and Girls Club, and we have one person shadow us, and they have to leave for the picture. So would Arabella Gipp stand, please? And she was the outstanding candidate last night. There were 6 that spoke from all over. She was outstanding candidate. And actually the candidate selected was from Wichita last night. So, but she was one of those as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Representative Ballard. Representative Mason. You're good? Okay. Now we'll go ahead and move on to Dylan to go through the items that have been suggested by the Budget Committee recommendations so we can work on the budget. Dylan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Dylan Deere. I am the Acting Director for Fiscal Affairs for the Legislative Research Department. And I was going to talk a little bit about the documents that you have before you first, before I start to go through them in a little bit more detail. So you'll have the gray documents. We refer to this as the shorthand document. It should describe every change from the governor's recommendation made by this committee so far. If you have any questions about any of those, feel free to reach out to us. The next one is this dark blue, royal blue, I guess is what I'll call it. There's 2 pages. It is front and back. These are items that were placed on a list to review prior to finalization of the budget. So this means that it's reviewed before first adjournment. So I guess at this point in time is when we would review the blue items. I would note this is a little bit different than what you may have seen in the past. So there's obviously, these are all House items. That's the chamber items. You can see the agency. You can see the analyst responsible for that particular agency. And then it has a column for currently included in the budget. That means, is this item included in the budget as it currently stands? An example would be, you can look at Secretary of State. Okay, right here, it says yes, it is included in the budget. So what you would be considering is whether to add to that, whether to delete from that. So if you were to delete from that, that would reduce the budget. If it's no, if you were to add it, it would add to the budget. So it just sort of gives you sort of a framework of where we currently stand on that item. The next item is items for omnibus consideration. That is a green sheet like this. And so these are items that are currently tagged for review after first adjournment. And after the consensus revenue estimates and the consensus caseload estimates are released. It is possible for items to appear both on the blue and the green sheet. It might have been said review prior to finalization and review at omnibus. There's no problem with that. There will be a final opportunity to review the omnibus list. With that stated, I will return to the gray sheet and do a really brief overview. I don't want to take more of the committee's time than necessary. If you turn to page 3, the first thing you'll notice in that total square box that you see sort of in the middle right here, you'll see a really big delete. And that is the Department of Education. So the net delete is 4.5 billion SGF, and of course the Department of Education has simply been removed from this budget and removed into another bill. Nonetheless, against this bill, it is considered to be a deletion. If you do not include the Department of Education, it's a reduction of 71.1 million SGF. That's driven by two primary changes. One is the Department of Labor Unemployment Insurance Modernization System being funded not by the State General Fund, but instead by ARPA funds. The other one is the $53 million for the for the water reservoirs that is deleted. But if you turn to page 1, I did want to mention two other items. So just turn to the front page briefly. And in the middle, you have the Office of the Governor. So here you have the delete the transfer of $50 million from the State General Fund to the Office of the Governor for state match for agencies applying for federal grant programs. That's item number 1. That is it's the State General Fund. It adds money into the ending balance, okay, for profile purposes, but it doesn't change expenditures. All right, and those funds are deleted. Item number 2 is the recommendation to suspend any expenditures from those ARPA discretionary funds that are not already expended or legally obligated. And item number 3 is the Governor's Infrastructure Leveraging Fund, and that just changes the approval process for that particular fund. And that was the last things I was going to talk about on 23, unless there are any questions.
All right, thank you, Dylan. And actually, Representative Landwehr and I have had a conversation in the last couple of days. So in regards to item number 2 with the ARPA funds, what is the amount of the unencumbered balances?
We do have a report from the Office of Recovery on that, and so I'll just provide that report to the committee if that works.
Okay. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this kind of goes along with future ARPA funds. Is there any way to include something in proviso language about, for example, the $6.7 trillion budget that President Biden's putting forward? It includes lots of money for states, particularly educations. And I just don't want our state to be in the same situation that we were several years ago, where the money bypasses the legislative process. And so I guess then my question is there any way to be proactive on future money so that we're not in that same situation?
Well, and I would guess that, and maybe Jill will correct me if I'm wrong. She does all the time. We could actually have a proviso or an amendment that would specify any future federal dollars coming in to the state in regards to recovery or whatever the case may be, go through the legislative process.
Could we have that? Could that be a formal request to maybe have some language that our committee could review and act upon?
Yeah, when we start working on the budget, we can
just do it at that time.
Do it at that time.
All right, thank you.
And have that language added. Any further questions for Dylan? Representative Landwehr.
So when will we have that report?
We actually have the report. The Legislative Research Department has a report, and I think Merle may actually bring it over to you in a few minutes.
So we will have it shortly. Any other questions for Dylan in regards to the budget items? Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe this is, are we on 2024 as well, or just 23?
Well, any year.
Okay. It looks like the Department of Commerce deletions that were meant to be reviewed at omnibus didn't make it onto the green sheet.
I think they might be on the blue sheet.
I didn't see them there.
I do not see them there either.
So it's items on page 5 of the gray sheets, items 1 and 2 under Department of Commerce.
Good catch. We will make sure we get those added to the green sheet.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions for Dylan? All right.
Do you want me to review the 24 items?
Yes, please.
All right, so starting on page 3, and I'm just going to touch on the larger items. If you move to the Office of the Governor, which is the last agency listed here, item number 1, there's an addition of $2 million SGF for domestic violence and assault programs that would go through the Governor's Grants Program. There's already funding for domestic violence and assault programs, so this is an expansion of existing funding. If you turn to page 4 and go to the middle of the page, you see the Board of Indigent Defense Services. There's an addition of 3.8 million SGF and 30 FTE positions to cover first-year startup costs and staffing costs for some new public defender offices. Under the judicial branch, you have the deletion of 16.3 million SGF to not adopt the agency's salary adjustment plan for fiscal year 2024. On the bottom one, under Department of Administration, you have deletion of 6.5 million SGF and adding the same amount from federal funds for repairs to the state and modernization of the state printing plants. For item number 2, you have the deletion of 1.5 million SGF and 10 FTE positions to eliminate the governor's recommendation to establish a division of policy within the division of budget. Turning to page 5. You have the 2 Department of Commerce, or three Department of Commerce items that were enhancements. And on Department of Health and Environment Health, I'll touch on a few of these. Item number 1 is an addition of $4.3 million for the visit to increase the Medicaid physician fee schedule to 5%. By 5%. There's an addition of 2.0 million SGF to increase the durable medical equipment billing codes to 80% of Medicaid rates. There's an addition of 2 million SGF to increase the emergency medical services ground ambulance rates to 100% of the Medicare rates. There's an addition of 5 million SGF for community-based primary care grants. And on the bottom, there is the deletion of Medicaid expansion, which adds 71.5 million SGF and deletes 671.4 million all funds. Turning to page 6. On KDADS, you have deletion of 22 million for the expansion of the Ascension Via Christi Emergency Room to add 20 beds for mental health patients. On Department for Children and Families, item number 3, you have the addition of 5.1 million SGF for the foster care therapeutic program. On the bottom for Board of Regents, you have the addition of 4.5 million SGF for the comprehensive grant program. I think that was the fix that was discussed extensively. If you turn to page 7, you have the addition of $2 million SGF for the state scholarship program, deletion of 20 million SGF for the post-secondary education operating grant, deletion of 17.9 million SGF for the state university inflation post-secondary operating grant, deletion of 8 million SGF for the NIST academic playbook, deletion of 4 million SGF for student micro-internships, then deletion of 3.8 million SGF for the post-secondary operating grant fund inflationary expenses. Item number 12 also has the DEI language that is included. Okay, and there's some other language adjustments included in there as well. On the bottom, for University of Kansas, you have the addition of 3.8 million SGF for the Kansas Geological Survey Program. Turning to page 8. Still on the University of Kansas, addition of 1.9 million SGF for the Kansas Geological Survey Program for critical program restoration. For Emporia State University, you have the addition of 9 million SGF for a newly appropriated Emporia State Investment Model account. Then in the middle there, you have the Department of Education. All right. For Department of Corrections, you have the deletion of 9.6 million SGF for the KP&F conversion. You have the addition of 1.4 million SGF for the newly created Pathways to Purpose program pilot accounts. For Lansing Correctional Facility, it's the deletion of 9.9 million SGF to raise the old maximum security facility and delay that to a future date. Turning to page 9. You have the Department of Wildlife and Parks. Item number 1, Department of Wildlife and Parks law enforcement officers join the KP&F, so that's deletion of KP&F conversion there. And once again, you have a very big number in the middle of page 9, and that's caused by the deletion of the Department of Education. But if you were to remove the deletion of the Department of Education, the fiscal year 2024 recommendation adds $5.7 million SGF and deletes $741.9 million all funds. The $741.9 is, of course, largely related to Medicaid expansion. I know I went over that really fast, but I just kind of want to lay the framework of the big items before you monetarily, for the most part. Of course, there's some more policy items. Maybe Jill would be more empowered to respond to some of those pure language items.
All right. Thank you, Dylan. Any questions in regards to fiscal year 2024? Representative Landwehr.
Yeah, on page 8 on the Emporia State University, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Dylan?
That's pretty much what I know about it. It's a new Emporia State investment model account. It's supposed to be a new program that's coming forward, but that's pretty much what I know about it right there.
And actually, we were having a conversation about this ourselves. And maybe Chairman Howe can elaborate on this. It was my impression that it was $9 million total over 3 years, $3 million a year. But is that not correct?
No, Chairman Waymaster, the request initially was a 3-year ask. The Budget Committee only recommended 1 year, but the first year was $9 million, the second was $8 million, the third year was $7.5 million. For 18 years, the Emporia State University had declining enrollment of students on campus. And so when the new leadership came in, they were looking for ways to reduce and realign their resources so they could be successful in years ahead. So they've made some hard decisions. I think 47 FTEs have gone away. And with those, cuts or realignment of resources that saved the university $5 million, they've been able to reinvest that money in programs that are succeeding and that they have growth in, but they still have a $10 million deficit. And so that's what they're struggling with. They're asking the legislature just for a 3-year commitment. We decided as a subcommittee to recommend just 1 year, then have them come back to demonstrate to the legislature their efforts and update us with their success. So,
well, the only thing that I would contend is that the University of Kansas did the same thing with the current chancellor when he came in, and they right-sized the University of Kansas, and they didn't receive any benefit from the state because of the right sizing of the University of Kansas. Representative Landwehr.
Well, I guess when we start working all of this, I'm having a lot of heartburn on that particular line item.
Right. Any further questions for Dylan in regards to 2024? Representative Helgerson.
In looking at the budget and what we've done, it seems that there are several places that the governor may have taken some liberty about what they put in the budget that was not passed by the legislature. The governor's staff and I have had some disagreement about Medicaid expansion, and my feeling is that under the present rules and statutes that the governor's office cannot add the money in for Medicaid expansion because the legislature has not acted on it. It also came to my, it looks like there are several other areas that statute may require us to do something that we may not have followed. It looked at first glance that one of the items may have been the nursing home requirements about what we fund. That technically we're supposed to fund what the caseloads are and the increases according to what the statute had said previously. Is that the case, and is there other examples that may have been questions with the way the budget was put together?
Dylan.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't have any questions personally about the way the budget was put together, but then, it's just a recommendation as a starting point. Of course, the legislature is not compelled to fund caseloads at that level. It's just like a starting point to be put into the budget. And so I wouldn't opine on an issue of whether or not there was a statutory violation in the rules regarding budgetary submission at this point.
That's fine. Thank you.
Any further questions for Dylan in regards to 2024? All right, seeing none, move on to the few items on 2025.
So for fiscal year 2025, obviously you have some biennial agencies. Biennial agencies are those limited number of fee-funded agencies that actually submit a 2-year budget, and you have some small adjustments for those. If you turn to the final page, you do have the money that's in for the Kansas Comprehensive Grant Program, okay, and the deletion of the Department of Education budget. One interesting difference between this year's budget bill and what we've seen in the past is that there was some funding for the Board of Regents and for the Department of Education put in for fiscal year 2025, some adjustments to those numbers. So, I mean, that's, provides an opportunity to make some adjustments right here. Anyway, it's just a little bit different than what we've seen in the past, as you actually see those out-year appropriations that were inside of the budget bill.
All right, thank you, Dylan. Any questions for Dylan in regards to fiscal year 2025? All right, seeing none, right now we're going to open up discussion on, yes, Dylan.
Mr. Chairman, with permission, we do have the response on the ARPA funds, if you'd like us to pass that out.
Yes, please.
There.
All right. I think we're good. Thank you, Dylan. So we're going to go ahead and open up discussion on House Bill 2273. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To get us started out, I would like to move that we take the contents of House Bill 2273 and the contents of House Bill 2274 and move them into Senate Bill 42.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Francis. All those in...
We're not deleting...
No. We're adding the contents of Senate Bill 42. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. So we have the two budget bills, the supplemental and then also the budget bill for 2024 and 2025 into the claims against the state is Senate Bill 42. So that is all now in Senate Bill 42. Discussion on the amended Senate Bill 42. Representative Anderson.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my committee, when we were going over KBI, had $910,000 for an HVAC unit for the Great Bend Laboratory. It was a request by this committee to take it out at the time and send it to State Building Committee for a recommendation. The Joint Committee reviewed the matter on February 13th and recommended adding the $910,000 to the Great Bend Laboratory. The agency indicates the HVAC systems at laboratories are uniquely complex and replacement of Great Bend system is necessary due to recent humidity challenges. The agency operates 4 laboratories with the Great Bend Lab providing services to the western Kansas region. And so since they did recommend it, I moved to put the $910,000 SGF back in for the HVAC.
And just for clarification, was that an omnibus item that we're putting back into the budget bill?
I believe it was pushed off for that, yes.
Okay. All right. So you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Helgerson. Discussion on the motion. Representative Helgerson.
I don't remember. Does the Correctional Building Fund have any funds left in it?
So,
Representative Anderson.
can you repeat that?
Representative Helgerson.
I'm sorry.
He wants you to repeat.
Oh, repeat. Does the Correctional Building Fund have any excess funds that has not been dedicated?
Representative Anderson.
I assume your motion was SGF.
It is, yes. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And while you're looking Is ARPA funds available for that?
The agency requested ARPA funds and
Okay.
were denied.
Yeah, they were not approved.
They were not approved?
No, they were not.
There is no additional CIBF funds remaining.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The point is moot now. I was going to question the wisdom of using correctional building funds for the KBI building, expansion of scope just a little bit there. But since there's no funds there anyway, it doesn't matter.
And just for clarification, Representative Anderson, is this for 23 or 24?
This is 2024.
Okay, thank you. Representative Tarwater. You have a question? All right. Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm a little bit lost on this. Is this on any of the sheets before us, or this is an added proviso, or?
Yeah, so this was an enhancement from my committee, and then it was just taken out to be recommended by State Building. Mr. Chairman, we do have an informational sheet if you'd like Merle to pass it out.
Yes, please pass it out.
Is it on is it on the gray, green, or blue sheets? My question. Blue sheet? All right.
It's actually on the blue sheet, item number 12,
All right, thank you.
for the $910,000 for the HVAC system for the Great Bend Laboratory. Any further discussion in regards to the proposed amendment? All right, thank you. All right, seeing no further discussion, Representative Anderson, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's go to, and this should be a simple clarification. Gray sheet, page 2, number 2 on KDADS, about in the middle. When I made that proposed amendment that passed, that was for budget years 23 and 24, but I don't see the same language inserted in 24. And so I just wanted to make sure that we have that same language inserted in the 24 budget, because I don't see that under the KDADS additions. Yeah, that was.
I would say for the revisor's office, when that was initially made, was that supposed to cascade into 2024? Okay, so when we had the discussion in regards to the KDAD's budget, your motion passed, and then we deleted everything out of KDAD's, and that took it out in 2024. So you would need to add the language back in for 2024, and if you want to do it for 2025. So you need to make a motion to have that language added back in.
I will make the motion to have the language on page 2, item number 2 under KDADS that is specified for 2023 to be added to 2024 and 2025, please.
All right, seconded by Representative Helgerson. Any discussion on the motion by Representative Owens? Yeah, just clarify. All right, seeing none, Representative Owens, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 9, Wildlife and Parks number 4. I'd like to just simply add the word. This is antlerless. I'd like to also just add the word antler so they'd have a choice when they bought the license.
So we're going to have antlers back into the budget bill?
Mason?
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative, seconded by Representative Helgerson. Discussion on the motion. So exactly what does your motion do?
It just adds the word, right now it reads antlerless, so it'd be doe only. Anyway, we're just adding the word antler, so when they buy their license, they would be either or. So that way they just wouldn't be coming here just for hunting female deer.
And on what page on the gray sheet is this referencing to?
Okay, so you're on page 9, number 4, under wildlife and parks.
Right. You know, you make our life difficult in conference when we have to discuss antlers.
You know, it's a tough job.
Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my chairman has set me up for this because I was the one who made the motion to be for doe licenses, but we have testimony from Wildlife and Parks. If we want to control the deer population, this is what we need to do, and that's the reason it was put in there this way. So I object to the motion. I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, as much as I appreciate the motion, I think we had a pretty lengthy discussion that day about this, if everybody remembers. And if I remember rightly, it came out of your committee antlered, and we changed it to the antlerless, I think, because we wanted to make sure that we just zeroed in on the antlerless deer permits. So I would be opposed to this amendment also.
Representative Owens. Representative Rogers, do you have a question? Okay. Any further discussion on the motion?
Yeah.
Helgeson, yes. He's being nice. All right, seeing no further discussion, Representative Corbett, you may close.
Thank you, Chair. The one reason for this was setting in the resident deer permits, there's 25,000 resident deer permits that are not being used. The residents aren't hunting. So this will lead into my proviso later, but I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
No.
The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it. Motion fails. We're back on the budget bill as amended. Representative Landwehr.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, on page 3 under Kansas State Fair Board, if you recall, we had the discussion about the cameras and the lighting situation, and in further discussion with the director of the State Fair Board, it was supposed to be $600,000 for 2 years, so it'd be like $1.2 million. So at this time, I'd like to add $600,000 to the Kansas State Fair Board to install additional motion sensor lighting and cameras on the grounds of the State Fair Board, and this would be in year 2024.
So item number 1 under the Kansas State Fair Board is actually falling under fiscal year 2023. But you want to move this to 2024?
No, I'm adding. So 23 stays with that 600,000. Then we add 600,000 to 2024.
Okay.
Because it should have been $1.2 million.
All state general fund. Yeah. All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Carlin. Discussion on the motion. Oh, Carlin does not second it. Seconded by Representative Turk. Now discussion on the motion. Representative Corbett.
So in our meeting, the motion was for $300,000 each year, so a total of $600,000, not $1.2 million. So I would not support this motion because $600,000 would buy a lot of cameras and lights. I would think for more than enough for the state fair.
Representative Carlin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, we did recommend to the committee $300,000 and $300,000, and whether we do it all at once or not was the question in this committee. But I know that they felt that $600,000 was the amount the Fair Board wanted for that project, and so I won't be supporting that. Thank you.
Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative from Sedgwick. In conversation with Brian, I guess the 1.2, he believes that will even give them kind of all the enhancements in if they do 600 over 2 years. Is that what's in your last discussion with him?
Representative Landwehr.
Well, and I should have had my notes down here, and I did not bring them with me on my conversation because he did send us pictures of the diagrams of where all this would be placed. But my recollection was it would be $1.2 million total for all of them.
Representative Rogers.
And if you've talked to him on something different, then I'm
No, that would be for lighting, cameras, the whole thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, because if you've ever, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine.
Because if you've ever walked that fairground after it gets dark and you're coming from the west side to the east, which is where all the rides and all that stuff lights up the skies at night, it is pitch dark and you don't see a lot of things. And so, they've got the issue of the, things being destroyed, things coming up missing, and then it will be a lot easier for the patrons with the sensor. So there won't be lights that'll be on all the time. They'll be activated by motion.
Sure. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask the maker of the amendment, is this a budget enhancement or is this a one-time expenditure that's being authorized?
Representative Landwehr.
It's one time at this point.
Okay, just wanted to make sure it was phrased that way because I've messed up before.
Yeah, no, I'm not adding that every year, no.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Alcala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to oppose this amendment because when they were in committee, his conversation with the committee, and if I'm wrong, somebody interject, was that he could make this work. He did say he wanted additional money for cameras, but he could push that off. We felt the lighting was very important. Cameras, if I wake up in the morning, there's spray paint on my garage, I know somebody spray painted it. I don't need to see it on a camera. And cameras, it's very hard to prosecute with footage if you can't identify who the individual is, other than you can just see them. So we thought the lighting was real important, but it always doesn't seem good when you come to committee and you say one thing, and then you go out and you visit with other legislators. I know that's how the system works, and then you ask for more because the committee was willing to make exceptions if they had to, but my understanding from him was he was good with that and he could make that work. Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chair. It's pretty close. When it went out of our committee, it was the $600,000 total for lights and cameras, and he was happy with that. And I think that I would rather see that get all put up and wait a couple of years. If they need more, we can come back and visit it. But let them spend their $600,000 and see where they're at.
Any further discussion on the motion? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to jump in here again. From the sound of the discussion, I think it might be appropriate to make a substitute motion for $600,000 rather than the $1.2 million.
It's already in there.
Oh.
In 2023. This is an additional $600,000 in 2024.
Oh, very good.
That's the
Never
motion.
mind. Cancel everything I was talking about just then.
Any further discussion on the motion? Representative Helgerson.
First, in full disclosure, I want to make sure everybody understands that I have a contract with the state fair and we set the tables and drapes and everything else, and I'm getting very uncomfortable about voting for this. But I also have to say, this is the second, third, or fourth time that the state fair has come in and asked for additional items. I have spent probably more time than anyone here at those grounds in doing the work that's necessary before and after the fairgrounds. I don't know, in each year we have to add additional money, and it is a concern to me that they have a capital plan and we keep adding more and more, and I don't think the legislature has a true handle on the amount of money that's going to be necessary to bring it up to the standards that it's probably needed. And I would hope that someone here takes the lead and looks at that amount of money that's going to be needed and then make the recommendations for the entire committee. Not this year possibly, but it is a very deep hole. So, and we still have, what is it, 10 million, 12 million out there that has to be matched for the bison? I can't remember. So that's my cautionary tale. It's well worth it. It needs to be done, but it's a deep hole that you're setting into.
Any further discussion in regards to the Landwehr amendment? All right, seeing none, Representative Landwehr.
And I don't necessarily disagree with what Representative Helgerson has said, and I think it's been a lot of years since we had a major capital project on this. And oh my gosh, it would have been late 90s, early 2000s, and we did some bonding and some different things else. We also saved the old mill. I did just get I think there was confusion in the entire discussion about the funding on this. I'm not going to have heartburn one way or the other. I just wanted to make sure, as you know, in this committee next to Henry Helgerson, I spend a great deal of time out there, but I know he's out there a whole lot more and has been for many, many years, is that it can be rather dangerous walking around that facility at night once it gets dark. And these are the things that our new director, who's actually come in here with a lot of experience having dealt with fairs across the country. And I think that it's time for us to make things not only safe for what we've invested out there and make sure that it's not destroyed, and it's also safe for our patrons. So I would move my motion.
All right, committee, you heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The noes appear to have it. Noes do have it. Motion fails. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go ahead and I'll pass this out. Get this passed. You already have it? Okay.
All right.
So,
Representative Hoffman, please describe or just go through your motion.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we had a discussion the other day on the funds that, the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the $220 million that was put in the budget. If you remember rightly, when we worked the budget, it was in the governor's budget, $220 million, and we had at that point set it aside and said, well, we want to make sure that there's state finance look at that before the funds are dispersed. And then we had more discussion and more testimony on it the other day. And so what we've come up with is a kind of a new way to go about doing the same thing. We've talked to industry, and we've worked this over. And so my motion would be to create, it's the Build Kansas Matching Grant Fund. That money would be housed in the State Treasurer's Office. The oversight on approval of the grant funds, which these are federal grant funds, and just want to make sure that just because you apply for a grant doesn't mean you're going to get it through the feds. So even if this amendment would put oversight into the Legislative Budget Committee on these grant fund requests, it would also allocate $55 million instead of doing the whole $220 million this year. It would put $55 million into the next 4 years, so fiscal year 24, 25, 26, 27, and that would be able to be rolled over. What I think is going to happen, I do not believe that they're going to be able to spend the whole $55 million in 24 anyway, so some of that's going to roll over. If there would be something that came up that and exceeded the $55 million for 1 year, the State Finance Council could approve to increase that, and it also would make sure that the Kansas Economic Development districts would at least put $10 million in each different district. So this is a little bit different of the way it was put in the budget, but it gives us as legislators more oversight into how these monies are going to be spent, and so that would be my motion.
All right, can we hear the motion? Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Francis. Discussion on the motion, Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell me what the Kansas Economic Development Districts are? How are those split up? Is there a graph or a diagram somewhere?
Representative Hoffman.
Yeah, I believe we had a graph in our proposal or at our presentation.
Okay.
A couple days ago.
Okay, I'll pull that up and review it. Thank you.
Representative Landwehr.
Okay, I guess where I have some confusion is I look at this program here, and then I look at all the funding that was added in for economic development in different communities across the state in the omnibus bill last year. Are these not the same program?
Representative Hoffman.
No, this is the new program, the bipartisan infrastructure law that just went into effect. These funds would be part of, if you remember in the discussion or in the testimony, these would be the funds that communities would apply for to the federal grant. The $5 million of this $55 million would be there to help. Many of these are small communities that maybe don't have the expertise to be able to put together a grant. The $5 million would be there to help them do that, and then the $50 million would be there to help with any cost. It's about a 20% cost share, and a lot of these little tiny communities do not have the 20%, and so this $50 million would be available for them to share or to do the matching grant.
So if, just for clarification purposes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this was $220 million was put aside in the governor's budget, and that's what she recommended in order for local communities, cities, counties to apply for the federal match in regards to the bipartisan infrastructure law. And this would be a fund that was set aside, $220 million in 2024, appropriated all at once, so local communities could use that $220 million to draw down federal dollars. And obviously, it's subject to the approval by the federal government. Your amendment does not authorize the $220 million all at once. It breaks it up over 4 years. So it's $55 million per year, as opposed to the governor's recommendation of allocating $220 million all at once, correct?
That is correct.
And so this is different than the money that you were referencing to last year in the budget bill, because that was actually from the ARPA funds. This is from the bipartisan infrastructure law to draw down the federal dollars. And if you remember in the presentation, Kansas is subject to receive approximately $3.8 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law. And this is to assist local communities in having the federal match if they wish to have other programs that they would like to have approved by the federal government. Representative Landwehr.
Okay, and I understand it's a new program and everything, and I know we've had some discussion on this. I just had a lot of heartburn when I pulled those omnibus items, and we had at least over $40 million that was appropriated for small communities for different projects. Does that mean that this type of stuff would stop, and then this program would be in place, and we wouldn't be doing these, adding things into here that pass neither chamber for small communities going forward in the future?
Well, and actually, the $220 million that the governor had recommended is not for rural or small communities. This is for any city or county across the state. So Sedgwick County, Johnson County, Wyandotte County, Shawnee County, they can, or the city of Topeka, they can apply for these funds as well for any projects that are going forward. So it's the entire state. It's not just targeted towards small communities.
Okay, well, and I know that, it's just, that was one of the things that was kind of mentioned. And like I said, and I'll make one more comment, and then I won't rehash on this, was over $40 million, no matching, just handed to them. So I hope that going forward that we're going to have a plan that we quit doing this kind of stuff at Omnibus. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Duly noted. Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the second time. I appreciate it. Is there, what is the plan of how these would be actually put out? Is there any expectation that local cities or counties are going to be expected to pay anything or have any skin in the game to access these funds and the federal funds?
Representative Hoffman.
So actually, a community can go out and just go straight to the federal government for these grants. I mean, they don't have to go through and ask for this part of this $220 million. The thought, though, is that there's many of these, especially smaller communities, that just are not going to have the money to be able to, and maybe their proposal in the grant to us would be that they pay this much, but then they get another amount from us, so maybe if it's they're asking for 100,000, and they want 90,000 from us and 10,000 they're going to put in. It can be a combination. My amendment, I mean, it's already in the budget. It's already moving forward. My amendment would just make sure that we as a legislature had a lot more input in how these funds are going to be distributed. As far as the $220 million, even if we approve a particular application to receive part of this money, that doesn't mean the federal government's going to approve it. So it's going to be over the next several years. It'll be, some of them will be approved, some of them won't be, and so I'm not saying that they wouldn't have any skin in the game, but some of them just do. They've got needs that they probably don't have the money to be able to, without a huge burden on their few residents that they have.
Representative Owens.
I guess my only hesitation, and I recognize this is already part of the budget, which arguably should or shouldn't be, but my concern goes back to this idea that we're handing over that authority to additional oversight through the State Finance Council, for example. I know that the treasurer's involved. I don't know. I just hate to be loose with money and want to make sure that there is adequate expectation that if the local county or city can, but is simply choosing not to, that it doesn't get completely put on the state. So.
Well, and I would probably reiterate with Representative Hoffman that this actually puts more guardrails in regards to the money, because right now, when we had the budget for the office of the governor, the $220 million was there with pretty much no legislative oversight. This actually puts more scrutiny on the money and actually breaks it up over 4 years, as opposed to having the $220 million dispersed from state general fund to the governor's office, where we have absolutely no control or oversight. This actually gives us more protection of that money. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so it was stated that this is currently in the budget. When did we vote for this? Some of us are kind of forgetting.
When it was voted, when we approved the recommendation from the General Government Budget Committee on the Office of the Governor.
Okay, I think there may be some voter regret in here. Second question is, when we're talking about drawing down federal monies, are we talking about a one-to-one, or as you mentioned, it's just up to every individual project on whether or not they would qualify?
Well, I'll have Representative Hoffman answer that, but it's my knowledge that the federal programs have not yet been initiated, so we don't know exactly what the percentage amount would be for a match, or what the local communities would have to put up for the federal match, because the federal government hasn't put up the programs yet. There are some programs that are out there already, but some have not been initiated. But I'll have Representative Hoffman
thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is correct, and that's part of the reason why I'm pretty sure that in 2024, there's going to be a fairly good chunk of that $50 million that's going to go over to the next year, because a lot of these programs, the federal government has not put out their rules and regulations for it. Some of them are coming out here in the next couple of months, but and some of them have. So it'll just be over the next several months, several years, as these programs are brought forth, that these that these communities will be able to ask for these grant funds.
Representative Howe.
Oh, I wasn't done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I apologize. Representative Williams has a follow-up question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry about that. So the treasurer is the one that will approve it, or the governor's office, unless it exceeds the 55 million annual cap? Who's the one in charge of the day-to-day approvals?
Representative Hoffman.
Okay, so the grant, the community will go out and create a grant, and create an application for a grant. They will ask for it. If they want state matching money, then that will come to the Legislative Budget Committee for approval. And then we will look at those, and that's where we can decide, okay, do they have the money? Should they put more money into it? Once we say yes or no in the Legislative Budget Committee, then that would go forward to the federal government. Ultimately, it's the federal government's decision whether or not to award that grant or not. The state treasurer's office is simply where this fund will house. That's the only thing that the state treasurer, we were trying to find a place to put these funds, and we decided the state treasurer was the best place rather than the governor's office.
And then ultimately, when these are announced, these would be awards from the governor's office. Or how would those awards be announced?
Representative Hoffman.
They would be announced probably through the different agencies that are helping with. If it's a transportation project, it would probably be announced through the transportation agency. If it's it would be announced through a different agency.
Representative Williams.
All right, thank you.
Now, Representative Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this be in addition to, for instance, the Small Cities Community Development Block Grant Program, which is administered by the Department of Commerce? Is this in addition to that, or is it just a mechanism for funneling the funds differently?
Let me answer that. This is an addition, yes. This was put aside when the governor had her budget recommendation for $220 million for the purpose of drawing down additional federal funds for local communities. So this is an addition to what you were referencing to. Representative Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we received this presentation, one of the questions I asked was, is there a means test to see that a city really needs it? And the answer was kind of, sort of, but that's a good idea. And I was wondering if the maker of the amendment would be open to adding a language that says a means test will be developed and used. I don't want to define it for them. I don't know enough about it, but I think it's a very good part of the guardrail system.
President Hoffman.
Yeah, I don't think that would be a problem. I mean, the more information that we get through, when we're making these decisions in the budget committee, the better. So, I don't see a problem with that.
Is that fine with the second? Okay, we'll have that language added into the amendment as well.
Thank you all very much.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the bringer of the amendment for moving this forward. One of the important things about this program that the federal government implemented is a lot of these programs are going to have a very short turnaround, as few as 90 days. And these communities are going to be struggling to get their proposals together and to bring them forward. And because of that, the legislature won't be in session. And I know the people that came up with this idea, one of their thoughts was, what's the closest thing we have to an appropriations committee that meets regularly in the off season? The members of this committee, help me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, but it's the chairman of the appropriations committee, the vice chair, the ranking minority member, one other member selected by the speaker. And then I believe on the Senate side, it's the chairman of the Ways and Means, ranking on the Ways and Means, and vice chair Ways and Means. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So, you know, we always talk about one of the problems with some of the earlier processes was we didn't have any legislative oversight. And I think this gives us legislative oversight. I think there was a question before about who's going to do the announcement on these. Obviously, it's kind of open-ended, probably depending upon what the actual proposal is. But one of the things in this bipartisan infrastructure law is that many of these programs are targeted specifically to communities across the state or regional groups across the state. So they're the ones that are going to be making the application, not the state. Hopefully the state will be available with some of our experts in each of the fields to help them with the grant process. Also, I think some of this money is to make sure that our local communities, our local regional planning groups have the expertise they need to bring down these funds. And I don't remember for sure on the original presentation, but wasn't it 60% of the funds are coming through formula and the other 40% are going to be discretionary? So if we don't have a plan in place to help our regional and local communities, our regional groups and local communities to access those discretionary funds, we're not going to get them. They're going to go someplace else. So I do, by the way, appreciate the recommendation that we have a means test. I do believe that once this program gets running, the LBC is going to have a massive influx of requests, and they're going to have to they're going to have to pick the winners and the losers, unfortunately. I don't envy you guys on that. But I think this is a great program. I think it strikes a balance between just having free will in the governor's office and having some legislative oversight. Thank you.
Well, and if you remember the presentation that we had last week, as I mentioned before, right now Kansas is poised to have basically a drawdown of $3.8 billion. We could possibly even get more. And so these dollars help the communities across the state of Kansas in drawing down more federal funds that would go to other states. So it is actually I guess, an initiative to actually draw down more federal dollars. Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm confused pretty confused about this, but tell me if a couple of things. First, Representative Hoffman referred to a presentation in committee about oversight and that kind of thing. Is that in your budget committee?
Representative Hoffman.
No, that was last Thursday.
In this committee?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, when we have $55 million a year for, what'd you say, how many small communities, they're going to need a lot of guidance. And that's what our community always was able to get from the Department of Commerce. And so I don't understand why there would be any reason at all to move this money away from the governor's office, with the lieutenant governor being in charge of Department of Commerce and of means testing everything they do. I mean, they scrutinize everything that's done. I don't know what means test would include that they do not already do. So I don't understand. And also, as Representative Francis mentioned, regional planning offices would be involved in this, and that would give us professional input into anything that these communities need or ask for. And so I think the process is already set up. I see no reason for this, and I see no reason to move it to the treasurer's office. It can be left right where it is, and the State Finance Council and Legislative Budget Committee would still have oversight.
Representative Hoffman. No, we don't.
Yeah, the Legislative Budget Committee would not have oversight unless we adopt this.
Representative Helgerson.
When this was first proposed, I had a series of questions and issues with this. The first, it is amazing and surprising that with all the counties and cities out there, that we didn't have anybody come and lobby us and testify in front of any of the committees about this. You put a tax bill together and you're going to have the League and the Association of Counties always come out. I think that's partially because this was a top-down proposal, which then in itself has some problems. I also think that there's a tremendous need out there. We can, between the bridges, the roads, the water pipes that we have in this state, we're going to use this plus everything else. Logistically, though, there is a concern I have, and if you might answer a few questions, Representative. The process is going to be that when a county or a city has a proposal, before they can put the proposal together, they have to have approval that they have matching dollars. So they're going to come to the Budget Committee and ask for a commitment for the funds?
Representative Hoffman.
Yes, I doubt if it'll just be individuals. There'll probably be at each meeting, there'll probably be quite a few different ones. But somebody has got to approve those funds.
Okay.
If we're going to have state general fund money, somebody has to approve whether or not those funds are allocated. So it would be the Legislative Budget Committee in this case.
All right. So after we receive, will the state or the local entity, whoever is the point person, will receive notification of those dollars? Who will manage the accountability of those dollars?
Representative Hoffman.
For the federal government, because they're not just going to turn the money over. They're going to say, here's the money, and you have to make sure that it follows the criteria. How is that going to work with the Budget Committee?
For the federal money?
Yeah, for the federal money.
I'm not sure that we have. I guess that once the Legislative Budget Committee said, yeah, this is something that we feel like we should put state general fund money in, the anticipation is that we would be okay with the federal money being added to it too. So I'm not sure if that's the answer that you're asking, but yeah, I want to reiterate that just because the Legislative Budget Committee says, yeah, we're gonna okay that we're gonna give X amount of dollars to this particular project does not mean that the federal government is going to okay that project. They will then submit that, and the federal government may or may not okay that project, and we don't have anything to do with that.
Representative Helgerson.
This basically gets to the crux of the issue. We are taking over the management of the grants to some extent because we're going to be responsible. I see a head being I think that we're stepping into the administration of this area as opposed to an oversight. And that's why I have some real concerns. I have concerns about the governor and the way it's been proposed. And it needs to have, as the chairman said, more guardrails put on. But I think that we don't want to overstep our responsibility of how we manage the grants, leave that to the state function, but build in guardrails to protect how it's being allocated.
Representative Francis.
And I think we're making this way too complicated. We've got local communities, local regional planning groups that are going to request funding, and they may not have adequate local funds to get that grant. It's going to be their responsibility to manage their grant. They're the grantee or the grantor. I don't know what the right word is. We're just assisting them with their local match because they either may not. Like, for instance, let's talk about, I would think this would happen in a separate appropriations process. Gosh, I should not be going down this rabbit hole right here. But let's say the Kansas City metro area has some transit plan, and the Kansas City, Johnson County, and Wyandotte County all want to load up their share, and maybe Leavenworth doesn't want to contribute, or Douglas County doesn't want to contribute. This state allotment can help make that project work. We may be dealing with a little town. Did anybody know there's a Nashville, Kansas? You know, we've got a town called Nashville, and I don't know what the situation is with their water system, but we have some of these communities out there that their water systems are functionally obsolete. their entire valuation of their community might be something like $100,000, and they need to upgrade their water system. They can use these. They can go themselves and apply for these grant funds. They may not have the adequate resources to provide the matching. I've heard a lot of this matching is 80-20. They may not have the $1.2 million they need to get this match, but maybe the state can help out with guidance and means testing and give them a portion of those funds. Anyway, I think we're making this way too hard. We're not going to be the administrator. We're just making sure that an appropriations type process can allocate these funds when we're not in session.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you. Just had a quick question. Should this end up being vetoed, does it take the whole $200 million out of the budget, or does it just go back to her proposed budget?
I would presume, and Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, since this would be altering the governor's recommendation of $220 million, if it would be vetoed, then it's out completely.
Nothing ever dies in this.
Well, that's true. Not till sine die. Nothing ever dies until sine die. Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree. I think this is being overly complicated. Let me remind you, everybody here, that whoever the federal government, once they bestow this grant, they will be the ones facilitating the requirements for the grant, as every agency in the federal government has. For example, the SBA or whatever. SBA provides a grant. The SBA makes sure you adhere to the grant. They request the documentation that proves you're adhering to the grant, et cetera, et cetera. The federal government will have the same setup. So they will be the ones facilitating it, not us. We will not take over that responsibility. And in essence, what we're doing here is we're buying a coupon. We just went to Groupon. We just bought a 20% off coupon. And for $220 million, we are getting $3.8 billion. We're simply buying a coupon here. So what this coupon does, the language of this coupon gives us more guidance, more guardrails to facilitate these funds, and this gives us, this body here, a say instead of just throwing it out there and saying good luck. This is a good amendment, and I will support it.
Representative Helgerson, again.
Thank you very much. I've been swayed by your arguments. I think that with the federal government putting in 80% of the funds, we'll hope that the state and the locals will be able to control this. And then when we have a discussion about other federal programs that they're putting in large amounts of money for the health structure of this state, that we will also take that opportunity.
Representative Owens.
Just maybe a substitute amendment is in order that we call this the Groupon amendment. Can we, no, I'm just kidding. I withdraw my motion.
Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to add a few points, in the bill law, 49% of the funds are mandated to be spent in disadvantaged communities. So that includes communities that have like environmental justice, low income, communities of color. So there's already kind of built in that requirement that those funds be spent in disadvantaged communities. So we may even be able to like pull from that language if we wanted to add that to ours. And then the other thing is last summer attending the ks.gov consults and the infrastructure summit, our local communities, that's what they were asking for, is that, like in my community, I now have 4 bridges closed, with the state about ready to close 2 more bridges. I now have people who try to get to work in Lenexa and lose their jobs because public transit cannot get them there on time. So in my community, like to try to fix some of those bridges, they're all locally owned. They're not state-owned bridges. And we can come up with part of the matching funds, but we may not be able to come up with all the matching funds. So again, it affects rural communities and large communities. It really affects disadvantaged communities, and that's where we should be putting our efforts. And then the last thing is I hope I totally agree that we should be setting aside dollars and we should be helping our local communities. I hope that there is coordination with the infrastructure hub, because we already have kind of a process set up that like moves forward projects based on when they're ready, based on their funding availability, based on the support. And then the other thing, when it comes to a lot of our local communities, that's the other issue they had, was in administering federal grants, because they just don't have the capacity. And so that's the other thing that KDOT has provided, is that they've provided a mechanism so if you are awarded one of these grants, they will actually administer the federal requirements on those grants. So I think a lot of the barriers that we've talked about are really easily addressed, and I totally support giving money to our local communities to help them meet these infrastructure needs and to help us bring down some more federal dollars. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, call the question.
All right. I don't think there's any need because I don't see any other discussion. So actually, Representative Hoffman, you may close.
All right. Thank you for the discussion. I think we've discussed it pretty thoroughly. So with that, I move my amendment.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, we're back on the budget as amended. Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, part of our budget for aging and disabilities was tabled, back to the governor's recommendations. So I do have 4 that I would like to discuss with you today. And if you have your papers, your packet from Thursday,
Are you going to reference the blue sheet?
Oh, I got a reference one. Okay, I can give you the gray. Is it the, which one? This one here. Okay. All right. If we're looking at senior nutrition services distributed through the area agencies on aging, is it on this one? It's $3 million. Okay.
Number 18. That's number 18.
Number 18.
It's number 18 on the blue sheet.
No, 18 on the blue sheet. Thank you. I'll try to identify those ahead of time. The senior nutrition services in this area has not had an increase since 2009. And part of you would know this as Meals on Wheels, basically. And we talk about the elderly in Kansas in their homes, keeping them as long as possible. The senior nutrition program serves more than 3.1 million meals annually, and some are done in congregate settings, some are home delivered, some do both. And when we talk about Meals on Wheels, it also provides that daily safety check on seniors in their homes, because sometimes they never get to see anyone except who comes in and out to deliver their meals or give it to them at the door. Given the rising cost of food, the entire population is saying this is not an outrageous number that we're asking for. It costs less than $1 per meal in this increase. It covers the entire state through 11 area agencies. And as I said, they haven't been funded, since 2009. We know how important it is for seniors to stay in their homes as long as possible before they have to move, but they have to have their meals coming in and out, and also people checking on them. And so for that reason, I would say this is a good investment of our money for our elderly who have, paid their taxes and did everything else perhaps that they were supposed to be doing, but they need their meals. And for that, I would propose that we add the $3 million in SGF for senior nutrition services.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Mason. Discussion on the motion. Representative Helgerson.
Can you tell us what the average meal cost is across the 11 area agencies?
Representative Ballard.
They didn't say, but I remembered several years ago, it cost them about $3 in order to deliver, but with the cost going up now in food, I would say it's substantially higher.
Okay, but they didn't give you figures as to how much it went up or what the proposal or what the deficit is?
No,
And it,
they
okay,
didn't- they
and then
didn't give us that.
How did we come up with the 3 million?
The 3 million, they were looking at it in terms of the meals that they're serving, which is like 3.1 million annually. But in terms of that figure also takes in consideration that sometimes they have to pay for mileage for volunteers to take the meals to them as well. So they were adding that. Also the preparation of the meals in the different places. Some can go to like restaurants in smaller rural areas to get their food at lunchtime and along those lines. So I think they were thinking of delivery, gas, preparing the food, cost.
Representative Helgerson?
Yeah, well, in the past, they always used to provide a average cost of meal, how much they had received, and then how much was the deficit. And then I'll piggyback with one other question. Are the counties putting in their maximum amount of dollars that they could be? I know Sedgwick County in particular has decided not to raise the mill levy that was dedicated for aging services. They have held back, and that's been somewhat of a discussion area. Has that been looked at?
Representative Ballard?
I don't know about every state, but I do know that Douglas County, I can account for ours. Yes, they do help supplement it.
Representative Helgerson?
Yeah.
And yes, they did increase it.
How much?
Well, I can only talk about our district in Douglas County. We increased ours like $1.25, and depending on how far they have to go, $1.50 on their meals. Because remember, a lot of them eat, and you take it to the home. But if they go to community centers, it's a donation, so they're not always charged for it.
And I guess that's why I'm trying to be specific, because I know that all the meals have gone up. The $3 million spread across the state, how does that really does it meet the needs, or is it too much or too little? And I would have hoped the agency would have given you the specific facts saying this is what the shortages are right now, as opposed to just saying we need 3 million.
Well, I could probably only offer, I'll read this. I can only offer, if you haven't funded them since 2009, you know everything has gone up substantially for that. But to answer your question, inflation has eroded the real dollar. So in 2021, the low-cost meal was, what, $2.50? $2.50. And in 23, $3.
Okay.
300.
Representative Helgerson?
And I'm sorry to belabor this. Is the 3 million going for cost of meals increase, or is it going for more seniors being served?
It says recommending an additional $3 million to fund nutrition services for older adults, and recommending that any and all future funds supporting older adult nutrition services be allocated to the designated AAAs to distribute safeguarding consistent program governance. We are happy to hear nutrition funds, but they did not give this information other than funds were not governed by the Old Americans Act and were distributed directly to the nutrition providers.
And I might elaborate a little bit on this, and this is probably one of the pitfalls that we're going to be finding ourselves in as a state in regards to the federal dollars that came in for the pandemic. And that a lot of the increases that was made for the senior nutrition program was actually funded by federal dollars. And in order to maintain that, the state's going to have to pick up. And that's just one of the casualties when we received all this federal money that came in from Congress, which we can have an opinion about that one way or another. I have my opinions about it. But that's just one of the issues. And so it's coming down to we backfill the money that is not going to be coming in from the federal government, or we don't feed our seniors. Needless to say, that's what it comes down to. And like I said, this is one of the casualties of receiving all this federal money, and now it's stopping, and the state is going to have to pick up the tab. Representative Mason.
That's a valid point. And we have a chart, too, that shows basically how how it did balloon up during the COVID years. And even with that going away, it looks like our funding and the federal funding, not the COVID funding, is drawing back down, and we're below where we were for several years. One interesting point about this is we're serving more meals statewide, but the home delivery has gone from 986,000 in 2015 actual to almost 2 million home deliveries. So that's part of the cost too, is that extra service that is being provided.
Representative Helgerson.
Totally agree with what the chairman said and what you have said. But I'm trying to dig down to find out, and you've just answered the question. It's gone up to 2 million meals, and to supplement the state general fund portion, that's what we have to have. So it is the population, and ideally, when this program was put in place, this actually helps our nursing home budget because it lowers it. And this and the Senior Care Act are extremely important. But the reason I'm, digging a little bit is because I want to know how much, as the chairman brings up, is it the deficit with the feds? Is it population growth? Is it food growth? And you've answered some of those questions. So thank you.
Any further discussion in regards to the Ballard Amendment? All right, seeing none, Representative Ballard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So since we're on the topic of federal money,
yes,
I'm going to have an amendment that I was going to wait till the end when we're putting the budget together, but I think I'll go ahead and do it right now since we're kind of on that same subject matter. So one of the good things that I would say that happened with the federal dollars that was coming in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic was the state of Kansas actually established a tourism project. It was called the Sunflower Summer Program, and that was allowing for children throughout the state of Kansas to travel to different venues across the state. And this is literally a statewide program. So we have venues from Wichita to Kansas City to Garden City, Hayes. So it's a true statewide program. Again, one of the casualties of the federal money running out, because this was all funded by federal money for the last 3 years, and actually they only have the funds for fiscal year 2023, is that this program is going to go away. And what this has been generating is in-state tourism across the state of Kansas. And so my proposal is, since we have some of the dollars that was negated from the governor's recommendation in regards to Economic Development Initiatives Fund, and actually I would, and Chairman Tarwater can correct me if I'm wrong, but I actually see this as a economic development tool. Because what this does is it gets people, not only in the state of Kansas, but also outside of the state of Kansas, to download this app, go to these venues, go to these communities, and spend money in those communities as far as buying fuel, food, whatever the case may be. So my proposal is for fiscal year 2024 and also in 2025 is to have $3 million from the Economic Development Initiatives Fund to fund the Sunflower Summer Program to continue this in-state tourism initiative that actually was started when this was proposed by, I believe it was the Children's Cabinet with the Department of Education to instigate this program and having in-state tourism dollars, because the funding actually came from the ESSER funds that is drawing out. And so I want to keep this program going so we can have in-state tourism, and actually it's been a very positive aspect in regards to tourism in the state of Kansas. The other caveat that I would add to that is I would like to see more venues added to the Sunflower Summer Program. And namely, I will talk about the Home on the Range cabin, which is in my district in Smith County. It's currently not on this venue program, but it's actually where the state song was written. And the cabin can be visited just outside of Athol, Kansas. So I would ask that it be expanded. And then also, if you have venues that do not charge admission, then a donation of $5 is given to the venue if they do not have an admission price. So that is my motion for the continuation of the Sunflower Summer Program, $3 million from EDIF. Seconded by Representative Helgerson. Discussion on the motion. Representative Corbett.
Chairman, I think it's a good thing. Is there any way we could, Chairman, is there any way we could expand this for the be like year-round instead of just summer?
Well, it was set up as a summer program because obviously kids are in school from September to May, and so it's strictly a summer program, and that was to get, during the pandemic, to get people out and moving around and touring parts of the state. So I would probably just keep it as a summer program as of right now.
Thank you.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I'm not at all familiar with this program, and I don't know if we had discussed it here, and I just zoned out. I've never heard of it. So could you fill me in on you gave me the overall what it was designed to achieve. My question really would go more to how does it do that? What does it actually do in order to promote people moving about the state?
Right. So this program was actually initiated with, like I said, the ESSER funds that was received by the Department of Education. And what they did is they created an app. And so you can download this app, and it has all the venues in the state of Kansas that is a participant in regards to historical, museums, tourism, parks, whatever the case may be. And so when you download this app, then you generate the ticket to go to this venue. That ticket is free of charge. So people are traveling in the state of Kansas when this was actually generated 3 years ago. And they're going to these different venues. And where this all initiated was, and I agree with you, I didn't know this existed until Exploration Place in Wichita visited with me and told me how important this program has been for their venue alone. And then I found out that the individual that was in my office actually went from Wichita to Hayes to the Sternberg Museum because they're a participant. And so it's getting people during the pandemic traveling around the state of Kansas. So when they download that ticket for the particular venue, then the money that was set aside is reimbursed back to the venue. So the venue is getting the money, but it's free of charge for those that are traveling around the state. And as I mentioned, then when they're going, say, from Wichita to Hayes, Kansas, they're fueling up, they're eating in restaurants, and it's generating economic development throughout the state of Kansas.
Okay, so I have two follow-up questions to that, if you don't mind.
You may.
All right. First off, how does a business become a participant in this program?
No business can be a participant. This is actually for a museum, or you have to have a tourism aspect to it. So you can't be a private business that actually wants to be on this app. It has to be a museum or some type of, the state parks are on there, or a historical venue.
All right, so it's not a business that's taking money.
No.
No, I mean, they are businesses if they're taking money. I mean, that's kind of what a business is.
Well, I would say in most aspects, it has to be a 501c3 or it has to be some type of institution that is set up for historical perspective. You can't have Applebee's on there.
All right. Well, they're fueling up, so I mean, we might as well. The other question would be, we're reimbursing tickets for people to we're buying them tickets to museums, is what this app basically does. What our funding mechanism does is fund people's in-state vacations to go to museums.
I do.
Is that,
I would
am I
say,
understanding this correctly?
I would say in essence that is correct. But what this did during the pandemic was to get people out and touring the state.
That's over, though.
That's over, but the program has been highly successful. And so, and that's why I'm talking about having the expansion. So you have more venues throughout the state of Kansas that's going to be on this app that is going to stir even more traveling in the state of Kansas.
Okay, but we're buying their entrance fee. That's.
And I see what path you're going down. Yes,
I'm just a little curious as to how that's a role of government at all.
I'm saying that this is creating in-state tourism, and it has been with in-state tourism, and it's economic development initiatives money. It's not state general fund. This is actually stirring economic development.
All right, well, that does mitigate to a degree. I'm afraid I can't back this up, though. This is a bridge too far, I do believe, in the defense of tourism. It goes a little too far in my book, but at least it is defended somewhat by using EDIF funds. So I guess I get that. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of my questions have been answered, but I do have two. How much was spent last year on the app?
I think it's $2.5 million, and they're expecting to have more tourism generated in the next year.
Okay, and then if I may, most of these agencies are state parks and state attractions. Why can't we just waive the fees on the app rather than fund it through the app?
No, we would possibly
and if it's
do
a
that
highly
in
successful
regards to
program,
state parks, but
if it's highly successful and it brings people in, why can't the organizations just waive the fee on their own? Because it's just for a child, right? It's not for the child and the adult. The adult still has to pay. Is that correct? Or?
No, I think it's for everybody.
For everybody to go to these places.
And so this is, and also another thing that, like in Garden City, it's the zoo, and so they have to generate funds in order to keep the zoo maintained. I think Representative Patton is on next in regards to the Topeka Zoo.
Right.
So
is the Topeka Zoo on there?
So I mean, they do have to have. There has to be some type of money generated to keep the facility going. And that's also a reason why I had mentioned in regards to venues, as I mentioned, the Home on the Range cabin does not have an admission fee, but there is a maintenance in regards to maintaining that property. And that is a historical part of the state of Kansas. Our state song was written in that cabin. And so that's why you have the donation effort, that if they do not charge an admission fee, then they get $5 per ticket in order to keep that venue open. Because they do have to do fundraising in order to keep that venue. And this gets people traveling around the state of Kansas. And as Representative Sutton had mentioned, he didn't know about it. I didn't know about it until I met with Exploration Place and how successful this program has actually been. And I've talked to others in maintaining this effort, and they've been very supportive in keeping this going.
So if somebody used the app, we pay the place $5, but if somebody goes there on their own, there's no entrance fee for anybody.
Correct.
At the cabin. Okay, thanks.
Representative Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I was someone who did not know about it the first year, but somehow came across it the second year and started promoting it on my social media pages, and then I decided I should try this out. And so we went to Wichita multiple times. We went to other spots in Kansas. My daughter, we kind of drug her along because you had to have a child to use it. But we went to places we would never go to. I would not have paid to take her to Exploration Place. She's in high school. We had a blast, but we stayed multiple nights in hotels and spent money. And I remember the weekend we went down to Wichita. I'm driving home, and I'm like, Kim, I think we saved like $25 on tickets, but spent $200 in Wichita. So for us, it worked. We spent a lot of money, saw some things, helped out those organizations that we visited because they got dollars through this. So it worked for us, and I think other people I talked to as well. So I'm supportive.
Representative Corbett.
One question I might have, in Canada, would this all include these agritourism businesses, like these farmers that have something going on their farms? There may not be much of admission, but could they sign up as a venue, and if it's accepted, could they use it? I mean, who's in charge of setting the venues?
Well, and that's something we'll probably have with the tourism department, with the Department of Commerce on selecting the venues that would be actually allowed to be on the app. That would be the selection process.
Okay, that's good for me.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind everybody, there was the discussion of, we could just waive the fees to the state parks. In the end, that's going to cost us more money because just remember the state parks are revenue. We don't put SGF into them. It's whatever they generate from people coming to the state parks. So if we would, decide, we're just going to waive that fee, in the end, we're going to have to come up with money somewhere for the state parks. So I'm not sure that's a great idea.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was just pulling this up, the Sunflower Summer app. It shows that it is a product of the Kansas State Department of Education. So who built the app and who is benefiting financially from the appropriation?
So the app was actually created because the money that was used to create the app was with the ESSER funds that were received from the federal government. So that's why it was the Department of Education that had created the app. We are going to be moving this from the Department of Education to the Department of Commerce because tourism is under the Department of Commerce. I don't know if I had that explicitly clear in my initial motion.
So will we then be deleting the funds so that was one-time ESSER funds?
One-time ESSER funds. And those funds are going to be running out. So they have enough funds to have it during the summer of 2023. But in 2024, those funds are no longer available by the federal government.
Okay, that answers my questions for now. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
You want to change the motion to include that to Department of Commerce?
And I think I elaborated on that. That is going to the Department of Commerce. And it's all right, the second. I can't remember who seconded it now. You were the second. Okay. Are you okay with that?
I'm fine.
All right. All right. Any further discussion in regards to my motion? All right. Seeing none, I move my motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. We're back on the budget as amended. Representative Mason.
You haven't.
Yes. Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's our desire to go ahead and revisit some of those monetary recs that were set aside on KDADs. I have several, I think, and I'm tag teaming with Representative Ballard. She has maybe three more. Do you want to start looking at those today? In the interest
we
of
can.
time?
We have about 10 minutes before we need to be on the floor. So I'm going to surmise that we're going to be back tomorrow working on the budget because we're not going to get through all the items.
I'll yield to Representative Ballard. Then okay.
If Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was one that we put off to omnibus, and it's also on this list. So if I'm looking at this list, it's number 15 on blue. And this was the one in terms of the setting up a crisis service for individuals with IDD. According to my list, we see that it's 2.1. But these grants will fund pilot programs to develop standards and build capacity. This also was tied in with the bill that we passed 988 on. And part of that was that eventually we would invest more money in looking at personal services in person, the crisis services. It will close the gaps, the barriers, build a continuing care in Kansas, improve overall coordination of direct services during crisis, and prevent future crisis. We know that with IDD, there's really no place that they really fit, so therefore they have when they've gotten into a crisis, they've either gone to jail, they've gone to emergency rooms, or they've gone to state hospitals. And we know we can't get into Osawatomie or anything else without, a doctor order or the police. Where do they go back to home? Maybe their environment was really creating this problem. They'll also be working with cross-training with corrections and law enforcement. It's the integration with 988, and they're developing a crisis plan development. So when we look at this, where do we deliver help for people with developmental disabilities, especially the older ones, where they can't comprehend right away? The police have to go through special training in order to deal with them or any of the mental health that they might have. And part of this program is being able to set up this crisis services. How do you handle this population of people? They can go for CMHCs, the mental health, but they're not really the ones that are going to deal with developmental disabilities. We have got to build a system that helps them more than we're doing now, and we are not doing that. When I spoke with the police said they go through different training in terms of how to calm them down, how we deal with them. Some jails are looking in terms of maybe developing a wing that they can put them there because they don't fit in with just putting them in with other people as a result. I hope you received information from InterHab about this in terms of how important for us to do it as the next step when we go into 988. I'm happy to explain further about it, but I think if we're looking at the how we coordinate this, that's what's really important, because this is the population that we're not providing enough services for because they're old enough, and many of them on the surface look like they can handle the situation, but when they're put into a crisis situation, they can't. So do we just put them in jail, or do they go in emergency rooms? And that is why I think they need it, and they have documented, and I hope you received information that told you more about it.
All right. I believe you made a motion.
I made a motion, yes, to add 2.1 million.
Seconded by Representative Mason. Discussion on the motion. Representative Helgerson.
A couple questions then. This is a new program, correct?
Representative Ballard.
Yes.
Okay, so we're starting a new program. We're only going to have one staff person. I assume the staff person is going to be at the state level?
Yes.
In the agency?
Yes, coordinating the program.
What's the $2 million for?
Well, those are the grants.
Okay.
And part of that is different organizations will also be helping with this, and they can apply for the grants. So it's not just one. They'll be working through KDADS. KDADS is aware that this is what they wanted to do because that's why it fit in with the bill that we had for 988. But they'll administer for organizations developing crisis services and individuals with disabilities. So it will go to multiple organizations.
Okay, so we're going to put out a series of grants of what's the typical grant going to be?
I don't know what the typical
Didn't the
cost.
agency give you an idea?
No, we didn't ask what the cost.
How did we come up with the $2 million?
Well, in terms of how many groups I think that might be willing to apply for it.
The agency didn't request this, though.
Representative Ballard.
No, the agency did not, but InterHab and other organizations did talk with the agency about it.
Did the counties across the state come and say, this is a program that we cannot fund and we think the state's obligation should be to pick this up?
I don't know, but did they do that? But I know there were different organizations that were presenting to us and in testimony talked about the need for this service.
Okay. All right, I'll make my pitch right now. This is a real important issue for two things. First, it's a new program that long after I'm gone, you're going to decide, some of you will have to decide whether or not we're going to fund it at $2 million or whether it's going to be $20 million. I tell you that because I've seen the program start. Second thing is, you need to ask yourself, is this a county function or is this a state function? It's real easy to accept the idea that we want to take care of all the needs. But counties have had the responsibility of taking care of various programs. We take care of when they're severe enough that they go to the state hospitals. We also provide a lot of funding. But now for doing case management on a crisis basis, it is a whole new program that you're stepping into, that this will be the first one of many requests that you're going to have. Now, I think it's extremely important that the agency said, we're not going to fund it right now because we can't fund the programs that are out there right now. You're going to have requests, they've already said, that are going to, probably one of them is the targeted case management of going from $55 to $75 or something. We have limited dollars, and I'm going to vote against this because, not that I'm not compassionate, but because you can't fund all the social service programs that we want to fund. And I believe that you should fund the ones we have in statute and the ones that we have funded for a regular basis, and to make sure they're funded adequately.
Representative Ballard.
It's a new program and that we're getting the funding for this, but it's not new in terms of when they were talking about 988. And if we go back and look at the bill, and part of it, and I can't think of the number right now, the bill indicated that we would start with the calls and everything else, and that's why we funded it $10 million. But it also said we would go further in terms of looking at development of disabilities. How do you handle people that are in crisis, that are delinquent, or don't know how to handle their emotions, and you can only go with jails or other places to put them. It was mentioned then. It wasn't that it was new, is that we would do funding as we went forward. We would do the funding of this program. So it didn't come out of the blue. It was incorporated long before we started 988.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, because we're dealing with the IDD population, which I really have a soft spot in my heart for, but I share some of the exact same concerns that Representative Helgerson shares, so I won't rehash that. But my question is, if I recall, we talked earlier in this body about the $50+ million to work on the waiting list that the governor didn't recommend. And so I'm just curious if it's those same people we're trying to address in a crisis situation that should really be receiving the services in the first place that we're obligated by a state to provide.
Representative Ballard.
I would agree with you. So I don't have an argument on that one. But part of it is, you have a crisis. How do you handle the situation? You have people that are in need of care, and you have limited sources of what you do, and I think this is one way to bridge that.
Representative Owens.
But then my question is, why aren't we focusing on the people and getting them off the wait list instead of creating a new program to temporarily address their needs when we should be working on programs to address their needs long term?
Representative Ballard.
Well, I would think we are waiting on, working on trying to do it, and that's why we want that community, we want to develop that new waiver that will take 2 or 2.5 years to do it. And part of it is that we'll only give them partial services that will help with that 10-year wait list. So that's one thing. But until we get to that 2.5 years or whatever that CMM will give us, that we need something to bridge it to get us to that point.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Landwehr.
One of the things, Mr. Chairman, is this is for crisis stabilization for our mobile crisis units. The need for respite beds and short-term community-based crisis stabilization. Currently, we have KDAD sending people out of state because we don't have the behavioral health services for the IDD population. These, like you heard Representative Ballard talk about, these individuals are sitting in jails and in our ERs. And, this will help somewhat with the wait list problem as well, because you hear us talk a lot about on the mental health side, and the IDD population has different services than the MH side does, and they need different beds.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know who over there this is best addressed to, but one of the concerns I hear about my community sometimes is we have individuals in the IDD community that are in crisis that are already receiving services. So is this program only for those that aren't receiving services? That was some of the comments I'd heard before. Or can it be those people that are receiving crises? Thank you.
Representative Ballard.
No, it's not limited. It could be for any organization that wants to promote more of what they're doing. So it's not limited to receiving those services. It's just that there's so many places that services are not available. But if you're providing it, maybe you would want this grant in order to do something else that you haven't been able to afford to do.
Representative Francis.
So, and maybe I wasn't clear, but I thought this was kind of like to go out when someone's having a meltdown and the people that are providing services right there can't really handle the situation, so they call EMS or they call the police department or they put them in the ER for a while. Am I misunderstanding what this is for?
Representative Ballard.
No, because it says best practice, they try to do it in terms of 24 hours, 36 or 72. So in terms of when they meet the crisis, it's a combination of those.
Representative Landwehr.
You've got the mobile crisis units, and then you also have you've got to take them somewhere. You don't leave those folks out there on the street and you just don't say, okay, you're fine, you're better. You've got to have somewhere to take them. And we knew that this was all coming as we worked with getting the mobile crisis units in the 988 legislation, not only for the mental health side, but also for the IDD population side. And sometimes these individuals, and at some point, Mr. Chairman, we may want to have a presentation because it's a real eye-opener when you hear some of the stories of, where one of their clients has gone out and, they've been triggered and had a caseworker not been on site, they probably would have been shot because they can become very agitated and very violent, and law enforcement's not trained to deal with these individuals. So it's kind of a combination, and it's growing on the IDD side, somewhat similar to what we've done on the MH side of things, but they go hand in hand.
Representative Ballard.
One other comment. When we talked about HB 2281, that was the bill, which was a piece of legislation that established the 988 crisis line. IDD crisis services are now in state law, but they're not funded. And part of this is that they haven't been funded, but they're now in state law. So part of what we're doing, if it's in 2281, we didn't do the funding of the other part of it. So when we look at it, it is a crisis, but it's a combination. And to answer, again, the question I was asked, until we get what we call that community waiver that can take away some of the wait period on our waiting list, we have got to do something in between, and it is not brand new. It was introduced in the bill that we passed before we got 988.
Any further discussion in regards to the motion? Seeing none, Representative Ballard, you may close.
Oh, thank you. I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The noes appear to have it.
Division.
Division's been called. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes on a vote from 11 to 8. All right, committee, we need to be on the floor right now, so we will resume discussion in regards to the state budget tomorrow when we reconvene at 9 a.m. So until 9 a.m., we are in recess.